Hello and welcome to the updated Reading Now Network data page. You have come upon the 2019 through 2022 Reading Now Network data. And this data has been available for about a decade now, and there are some changes that came out after the pandemic that we just want to go through very briefly, give you some updates if you're very familiar with the data or if you're brand new to this data set. There is data available for elementary, middle school, and high schools across the state of Michigan for both ELA proficiency and math proficiency. These are going to be as two separate graphs. Without the tabs in Tableau, we've embedded the Tableau tool right in the SI timeline. But you might want it to be full size, and to get back and forth between ELA and math, there are separate buttons that will open up a new tab for you to be able to take a look at a little bit larger view of the ELA and or the math. Like previous iterations of the Reading Now Network, each circle represents a group of students that are most likely in a school building. And the larger the circle, the more students that are in the building. The circles are plotted based on the percentage of free and reduced lunch and the percentage of proficiency. On the x-axis, you have from left to right schools that are in greater and greater poverty, and on the vertical axis, you have the percent of reading proficiency going higher and higher. As you see, the trend is that the lower your poverty rates, the higher your proficiency. The line represents the linear regression and the prediction based on free and reduced lunch and what similar schools with that type of makeup, how they are performing. So the bulk of the schools in the state will be along this line and in this yellow band. There will be some schools that are outperforming what we would expect, and they will be a bit higher. And these are the schools that we tend to focus on in the Reading Now Network because we want to learn from some of the schools that are doing the very best in the state. So to explain one of these boxes that is called out, you will see the name of the school and the district in which it is in, the grade level it serves, how many students were counted in the fall, the percentage of free and reduced lunch kids or economically disadvantaged, the fact that in ELA there are 65% of students that are proficient, and this has a residual of 20%. It is a positive 20%, which puts them in the green area and lets you know that they were expected to get 45% proficiency rather than 65% proficiency, and the difference between that is that 20%, which represents the residual. A note about high schools: I do expect high schools to have higher proficiencies, and any schools that contain just an 8th or an 11th grade, because the PSAT seems to have a lower benchmark in evidence-based reading and writing than what it does in math, and it seems to have a lower benchmark than what the M-STEP does for both ELA and mathematics. Now, it's not an exact correlation, but these two graphs will give you a little bit of an idea about what I'm talking about. If we go back to 2015, we can see that our ELA performance in 8th grade was pretty close to 50%. And when we switched over in 2019 to the PSAT, it miraculously jumped above 61% by switching tests. Whereas in math, we had a dismal 32 to 34%, and when we switched over to PSAT, we had a bit of a blip in 2019, but then essentially have been up in the upper 30s compared to the mid 30s. very comparable in terms of what the benchmark would be in mathematics as we transition from MSTEP to PSAT. But you can see that because of the lower benchmark for the evidence-based reading and writing, we expect proficiency scores to be much higher in 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Moving back to our data, we can not only hover over schools that are high performing, we can also change the type of buildings that we're looking at, which is new this year. We can actually turn off all of the buildings and all of the ISDs, and we can just look at district averages, which is relatively new this year. When we aggregate with a weighted average all of their students, we can see some districts that are performing extremely well, and that the majority of our districts are, of course, where we would expect them or where we would predict that they are according to their poverty rates. This will also allow us to change the type to look at the 56 ISDs across the state, which once you aggregate the ISDs, you'll see that almost all of them fall on the line. And if we wanted to remove the ISDs and the state average, we could certainly do that as well. Probably the most helpful piece to this tool would be the ability to highlight a district. And one of the districts that helped to start the Reading Now network was Greenville. And if I click on Greenville, I can see that their district average is about 13.45% above where we'd expect them to be, that all of their schools are in the green, except their high school is just on the verge of the yellow versus the green, and they have a bright spot up here in Cedar Crest Elementary that is 35% above where we'd expect them to be, with a free and reduced lunch count close to 3/4 of their kids. So highlighting a district will be probably the most used. We could also highlight an ISD like Oakland Schools, who has a large portion of the schools across the state, and you can see where they are going to continue to have many of the schools that fall along the line, with some significantly below the line in orange and some significantly above the line in green. Finally, the last piece of navigation is the ability to turn on or off certain regions. And if you know the MASA regions, you can turn on or off as many regions as what you'd like. Or if you just want to turn on all the ISDs, you can do that using this filter, but it also works by using the type that I showed you as well. And the last option there, if you're specifically looking for high schools and you wanted to look for traditional high schools, you could go by grade span and simply look for all of the schools like 7 through 12, 8, 9, 8 through 12, 9 through 12, 10 through 12, and 11 and 12, and it will give you just a look at all of our high schools so that you can take a specific look at which are some of the high schools that might be similar to you that are doing the best in performance in evidence-based reading and writing and proficiency on the PSAT and SAT. Once again, you'll need to go back to the SI timeline if you want to switch over to the math RNN graph, and you can use the orange button to click on. That will open a new tab and look at the math data as well. You will notice that the math data is lower than our reading and writing data. In fact, the prediction line as you get into higher poverty will put districts at a prediction of actually 10% or less, which is why there are no red schools in the highest poverty because we have a number of schools that have 0% proficiency in math. Certainly a need that should be addressed, and we can find some of these bright spots in these dark green across the spectrum on schools that are beating the odds. I do hope this video was helpful.